In 2011, a girl named Bethany stopped answering calls and responding to messages from friends for a few days. Then, one day, a friend saw Bethany's Facebook profile was online and managed to get a response from her. However, the way Bethany answered questions seemed off and strange. Furthermore, she didn't know things she should have easily known the answer to. In fact, it became clear that someone was impersonating her online to cover up a heinous crime. This case, which took over a decade to resolve, finally saw justice in 2023. Today, we delve into the tragic story of Bethany Decker's disappearance and death. Bethany Ann Littlejohn was born on May 13, 1989, in Virginia, United States. She was the eldest daughter of Kimberly Nelson and is remembered as a vibrant, hard-working individual with many dreams, always striving to achieve them. In a heartfelt letter she wrote to herself at 19, she outlined 4 major dreams: getting married, having children, building a solid career, and traveling around Europe. While she fulfilled 2 of these dreams, the other 2 remained unfulfilled due to a tragic event that struck when she was just 21 years old. Bethany attended Stafford High School, where she excelled academically. Her outstanding grades earned her a place at George Mason University, where she pursued a degree in economics. In 2008, while at university, Bethany met Emil Decker, a member of the American Army who dreamed of defending his country on the battlefield. The two dated for a while, and after she became pregnant, they decided to get married in February 2009. Bethany Littlejohn became Bethany Decker, and 6 months later, in August, the couple welcomed their son, Kai Decker. At the beginning of 2010, Emil, her husband, was called to train in Indiana, almost 950 kilometers away from where they lived. Even though the distance would strain the beginning of their marriage, Bethany supported her husband's departure, as this was the pursuit of his dream. Just as he had supported her in making her dreams come true, she felt it was only fair to support his. But from then on, things started to get complicated. She found herself alone for long periods, with a young child, juggling university studies and financial responsibilities. To make ends meet, she worked part-time as a waitress at Carrabba's Italian Grill. Whenever she had to work, she left her son with her mother-in-law. Bethany's dedication and hard work were evident to everyone who knew her, showcasing her resilience and determination. Emil spent long periods at the training camp and returned home for very short periods to rest. In one of those breaks, he noticed frequent message notifications on Bethany's phone. When he asked her about them, she explained that the boy sending the messages was just a friend from work, nothing significant. In reality, he was just a co-worker. But she seized the opportunity to confess her unhappiness with the marriage. This wasn't the life she'd envisioned, her husband away most of the time, overwhelming responsibilities on her shoulders, all while she still aimed to graduate and establish a career. Alone, she oscillated between stress and sadness, emotions she never expected to grapple with at just 20 years old. They talked calmly, like any loving couple, and decided to wait until his training ended so he could return home. But fate had other plans. In mid-2010, Emil was deployed to the American Army base in Afghanistan. With her husband overseas, the young woman had to juggle motherhood, studies, and work. They communicated via email and occasional phone calls, and Emil returned every 3 months for short 15-day breaks. During Emil's first return in mid-2010, they had another crucial conversation. Bethany planned to move to a cheaper apartment closer to work and Kai's school. She suggested taking a break from their relationship as this wasn't the life she desired. Emil agreed and returned to his parents' house during his brief stays in the US. She then moved to an apartment in Ashburn, Virginia, in September 2010. But the two still exchanged messages and spoke on the phone, and in one of these calls, Emil heard a man's voice, deep in the background, just a second or two before the call was disconnected. He even felt like she was the one who hung up the call, so that maybe he wouldn't notice that voice, but it didn't help. At that moment, he realized that his wife was with another man. He didn't know who it was, but given the problems in the marriage, that was kind of expected. Determined to salvage their marriage, Emil didn't confront her. He invited her on a vacation to Hawaii in January 2011 during his next return to the US, and she agreed. But what happened after that trip would irrevocably change Bethany Decker's life. The couple took the trip to Hawaii and arrived back on the morning of January 28th. It was only on their return that Bethany dropped a bombshell. She was having a relationship with another man, but that didn't catch him off guard. He had suspected this, but that wasn't the bombshell. Bethany was pregnant with her lover's child. Emil really didn't expect that. On the night of that day, the 28th, Bethany and Emil had planned to have dinner with her grandmother. Bethany was very close to her. She arrived a few hours early to talk to her and ask for advice. She confided that she was pregnant, that she was in a very delicate and completely lost situation, but at the same time her grandmother noticed her fear of the situation. She didn't really know what to say. She advised her to follow her heart. Emil arrived as scheduled and they had dinner together, but throughout the night, Bethany kept using her phone, responding to messages. Suddenly, she stood up and insisted she needed to leave. Despite her grandmother and Emil urging her to stay, she said, "You won't understand, but I need to go. Things could get a lot worse if I don't go home now." With that, she left, and Emil followed suit shortly after. 5 days later, on February 2nd, it was the day that Emil returned to Afghanistan. Normally, Bethany always accompanied him to the airport. Despite the problems in their marriage, the couple knew that the war was a much more serious thing, and that farewell at the airport could be their last. And that's why they made sure that the three of them, Emil, Bethany, and their son Kai, were there to give him a good luck hug. But this time, no one showed up. He called Bethany, but her phone was off. He contacted her workplace and learned she hadn't been there since their return from Hawaii. In a final attempt, he called her grandmother, explaining something strange was happening and asking her to check on Bethany as he needed to board his plane soon. Bethany's family and friends found it odd that Emil left amid the strange situation, but several factors influenced his decision. He imagined the confusion in Bethany's mind and thought she might not want to see him. Additionally, failing to report for duty in Afghanistan could have serious consequences. Despite the strange circumstances, he had no choice but to leave and entrust the situation to her family. For 3 weeks, Bethany showed no sign of life. Her phone was turned off. Absences from work and all the messages sent to her on Facebook, both by friends and family, including her husband, were not answered. In fact, she didn't even call her son Kai, who was at his in-laws' house all this time. But suddenly, something very strange happened. One of Bethany's friends noticed her Facebook profile was online and immediately sent a message. "Hi Bethany, how are you?" The response she received was off. It didn't sound like Bethany at all. Sensing something was wrong, the friend continued the conversation, subtly inserting questions and information only her friend would know. The evasive responses and subject changes confirmed her suspicions. She quickly called Bethany's grandmother to explain the situation. The grandmother then went to her granddaughter's apartment, saw that her car was parked in the same place, knocked on the apartment door, but no one answered. Without thinking twice, she went to the police, and so, on February 19th, 2011, Bethany Decker, aged 21, pregnant, was declared missing. Right away, Emil became the main suspect, but with his presence in Afghanistan, an interrogation became impossible, and the police needed to act quickly, because unfortunately there was already a 3-week window of time that everyone missed. Bethany's family and friends weren't initially alarmed by her silence, as her busy life often kept her out of touch. But 3 weeks was a long time, especially since her son Kai had been with his in-laws the entire time, and no one found her absence strange. The police began exchanging emails with Emil. During the exchange of messages, which by the way took a long time to be answered, he said that after dinner on the 28th, he left for his house. He had not gone after her. He also added that Bethany had an extramarital relationship with someone he didn't know who, and that she was pregnant for him. At the same time, the police were negotiating with the American army to release him so that he could return to the United States, as he was considered a potential suspect. A search warrant for Bethany's apartment revealed a surprise. She wasn't living alone. Men's clothes, perfumes, and razors indicated another presence. By talking to her co-workers and friends, the police were able to discover who her lover was. It was a man named Ronald Roldan. In fact, Ronald was Bethany's co-worker, the same one Emil had caught exchanging messages between the two of them before. Ronald was a 30-year-old Bolivian immigrant. Before meeting Bethany, he had 2 children from a previous marriage to a woman named Danielle Oliveira. He was known for already having a few stints with the police, the vast majority of which were due to drunkenness in public environments. As Bethany talked to him during her marital troubles, it didn't take long for the two to get involved, even though she was still married. But this new relationship proved to be more problematic than the previous one. Ronald was excessively jealous and controlling. He demanded, for example, that his girlfriend send photos of the people she was with whenever she went out with her friends. One of the moments considered one of the most absurd by her friends was when one night Bethany was having dinner with them, and suddenly she got up and left, saying that she had to go home to make dinner for her boyfriend. Leaving an abusive relationship is not easy. There are several things involved. There is emotional neediness, controlling and often threatening attitudes on the part of the abuser, the victim's feeling of guilt, and the influence that men have on them. And I say men because it is the majority of cases, and it is the example I'm presenting here today. It is so big that outsiders cannot open the person's eyes, because they are madly in love, because they believe that the abuser will change, or even because they are afraid of knowing that something worse could happen. The victim is just waiting for her only chance to get out of it. But unfortunately, often this chance may never come. Ronald told the police that he saw her on January 29th before she left for work, but that he never saw her again after that. This information made the police realize that Emil was not the last person who saw her, and at that moment, there were 2 theories. Emil was very upset about the fact that Bethany was with someone else, and on top of that, she was pregnant for him, and so he did something terrible to his wife. And on the other hand, Ronald, who already displayed abusive behavior, became furious when he saw her photos on social media with her ex-husband in Hawaii, and so he took action against her. On Ronald's side, things got even worse, because even though he lived in her house, he spent 3 weeks without communicating with her. Something quite strange, given the controlling nature of the relationship. In fact, he denied all accusations about being controlling or abusive, not telling anyone that Bethany was missing. But the police didn't find anything that could incriminate him, and that's why they couldn't arrest him. After 5 weeks without any progress in the investigations, but with the police being very incisive investigating Ronald, he stopped cooperating. He didn't respond any further and told the police to contact his lawyer whenever they wanted any information from him. In May 2011, Bethany would have turned 22, and it would also be around the month of the birth of the child she was carrying. Between May and June, the police contacted several hospitals in the country, especially those that covered her health insurance, to see if she had shown up to give birth. But nothing happened. Bethany did indeed disappear, and the chances that she was alive were getting smaller and smaller. Even though they had 2 potential suspects, the police had no evidence linking either of them to the disappearance. Months passed. The case went cold until it was archived. But everything would change in 2014 when Ronald's new girlfriend called Vicky asked for help from the police, accusing him of domestic violence. She had suffered a broken neck, was shot 3 times and lost eye. Yes, an eyeball. In December 2014, Ronald was arrested in North Carolina for assaulting his girlfriend, Vicky Willoughby. Their relationship had started off well, but over time, Ronald became controlling, possessive, and dangerous, to the point where she felt the need to buy a gun for self-defense. On the night of the attack, Ronald was suspicious that Vicky was cheating on him, and after he tried to take her phone, Ronald grabbed her by the hair and started punching her neck. Even though she was screaming in pain, she managed to escape, grab her gun, and shoot him twice. One shot hit him in the shoulder and the other in the stomach. He then took the gun and shot her 3 times, one of which resulted in the loss of her eye. While Ronald went to the bathroom to assess his injuries, Vicky crawled out of the house and sought help from neighbours, who immediately called the police. When the patrol arrived, he did not resist arrest and surrendered. At trial, he pleaded guilty to the charges, and in addition, some very important information came to light. Vicky was not the first case of domestic violence that Ronald was involved in after Bethany's disappearance. Before her, in April of that same year, 2014, he had an affair with another waitress called April Snyder, but the two didn't last long as he displayed controlling and abusive behaviour again. Their relationship ended when he, suspecting her of cheating, threw her down the stairs, spat in her face, and threw her belongings out of his home. April was not seriously injured. She filed a complaint and disappeared from his life. Before the jury delivered the verdict in Vicky's case, it was decided that Ronald would be extradited to Bolivia after serving his sentence. Ultimately, he was sentenced to 6 to 8 years and 3 months in prison. And here I want to make a personal observation, something I don't usually do in my episodes, because I always prefer to stick to the facts as they are, without making you influenced by my opinion. But I need to be honest here. What shitty system is this, where a person with a history of domestic violence shoots another person 3 times and gets 6 to 8 years in prison? It's infuriating. There are times when I try to keep the narrative line, but this time I can't. What the hell is that? Again, this is just my opinion, but it seems that the police didn't want to deal with him, perhaps making it easier to kick him out of the country and dismiss the matter as closed. But what about the victim's family? What sense of justice will they have in a country that gives such a sentence to a person who has already shown himself to be dangerous twice and was suspected of a disappearance? It's outrageous. Anyway, just over 6 years after serving his sentence on November 9th, 2020, Ronald was released, but instead of being deported to Bolivia, he was extradited to Virginia. With his arrest, along with evidence of the 2 domestic violence cases he caused in 2014, the Virginia police had reopened Bethany's case, making him now the main suspect. With less than a week to spare, the police obtained a preventive arrest warrant for him to await trial in prison. The trial was scheduled for 2 years and 3 months later, February 2023, and both he and his lawyers knew that this time he would not escape. Because of this, he decided to make a deal with the prosecutor's office as a way of trying to reduce the sentence, which could reach 40 years in prison in cases where the defendant is found guilty of first-degree murder. Ronald pleaded not guilty to the charge of first-degree murder when there is intent to kill, but pleaded guilty for second-degree murder. According to him, and I will make it clear that this is his version, the two argued on January 29, 2011, because she had mentioned that she was going to take an extra shift at the restaurant that night. This enraged him, and he, in an act of lack of control, ended up pushing her against the wall. Bethany hit her head on the corner of the window, fell to the floor, and didn't move after that. When he tried to feel her pulse, he realized his girlfriend was dead. Ronald claimed he panicked and chose not to contact authorities because he thought no one would believe him. He put her body in a large Christmas tree protective bag and threw it into the building's trash compactor. Because he pleaded guilty and confessed, the trial was brief. Ronald was officially found guilty and, as part of the deal, was sentenced to just 12 years and 6 months instead of 40. His new sentence is only a few months longer than the time Bethany had been missing. Ronald had 2 incidents of domestic violence in his 2014 record. One where April was pushed down the stairs, spat on and thrown out of the house, and another of Vicky, who he shot 3 times. Could it really be that in the fight he had with Bethany, it was just the corner of the window that caused her death? Can 12 years and 6 months of sentence also be considered justice? For Bethany's friends and family, for her husband Emil, who did everything possible to save the marriage, and especially her son Kai, who was only 13 years old at the time, the answer is no.